All right, Larry Gonzalez here with your housing market update for the second to the last week of April, really the last full week of April. And finally, a week where we can take a breath, not a lot of drama, actually pretty good. And if you wait until the end, I'll talk about where interest rates ended up at the end of the week and also what we can expect next week. Next week is going to be a market moving week. But let's get into what happened this week. The big three, the housing market, prices, inventory, and rates. Prices, inventory continue to go up, which is surprising. Rates, though, rates are down, and we'll show you that again at the end of this video. It's the big headline news. Well, home sales were a mixed bag this month. A couple of different reports that came out. And is there a recession coming? We'll talk about that. You know, really what we're seeing across the nation right now is a buyer's market. We'll get into some of the numbers that will show that. And then, hey, mortgage rates down, but how much and what can we expect moving forward? Again, wait until the end. Don't forget, like, comment, subscribe, because there's a lot of good news that I put out every single week regarding the housing market. All right, let's talk about some of the clickbait news that we're seeing. A lot of news talking about in the media, talking about cancellations, and that there were at 13% cancellations for 2025. Well, guess what? That's pretty much identical to what we had in 2024. And before COVID, the average number of cancellations of contracts, a pending home sale contract, was 11%. So we're really not that far up from where we were prior to COVID. So the numbers really aren't that bad. And then the media is also talking about 44% of sellers are giving concessions to the buyer, giving them closing cost money to pay their closing costs, to help them buy down their rate temporarily or permanently. And the media is making a big deal out of that. But guess what? It was higher. The number of seller concessions were higher in 2023 than they are right now in 2025. And if you look back to pre-COVID, we averaged between 40 and 45% sellers giving buyer concessions to help them pay their closing costs, to help them buy down their rate. I remember when I sold my house on the mainland in 2019, that was pretty normal. This is on the mainland, but it's pretty normal for the seller to pay the buyer's closing costs, especially on VA. So really, 44%, yeah, that's a lot. But I will tell you this right now, in Oahu, I would say probably 75%, especially on the west side, of sellers are giving buyer credits to help them either pay their closing costs or to buy down the rate. So don't believe all the news that you're reading or that you're hearing on the mainstream media, because these numbers aren't much worse. They're pretty average compared to what we have had historically. Now let's talk about signs pointing towards a recession. All right, there's a lot of signs that we are having an economic slowdown. First, you got truck bookings, all right? Truck bookings for March, this is pre-tariff. Large truck bookings are down 6%, medium down 33% year over year. This is before the tariff started to hit. And cancellations on truck bookings are down, the highest number of cancellations in 20 months. Now, that's trucking. Let's talk about shipping. Shipping slowdowns in April. This is post-tariff. We have blank sailings, basically canceled port stops. There's nothing to pick up in these ports, so they're not going to the ports. Down from 30,000 to 370,000 containers in 6 weeks. So big drop. Capacity scheduled. Asia to West Coast shipping's down 12% compared to 6 weeks ago. Asia to the East Coast down 14% compared to 6 weeks ago. So, hey, those post tariffs are starting to slow shipping down. Less stuff coming to the United States from Asia, something to keep an eye on, but that just shows that we're starting to slow down. Auto sales down 3% in the first quarter, and that's considering most of the automakers were front-loading, getting their cars in from overseas so they wouldn't be impacted by the tariffs. So despite front-loading, all right, auto sales are still down 3% in the first quarter. Housing starts down 11% in March. So big change in numbers, big drop in trucking, shipping, auto sales, home starts. All right, and now we're seeing, we already know that the people who are living paycheck to paycheck are struggling. But now we're starting to see that negative wealth effect. All right, wealthier borrowers are having trouble, and they are pulling out of purchases. They've seen all this money lost in the stock market, so they are less inclined to spend money on items that they don't necessarily need, but they were buying. Again, you have a lot of cash buyers. Actually, cash buyers are down. But maybe that vacation home, they're pulling out of these purchases. So something to keep an eye on. And one of the complaints that we're seeing against the Fed is, we know this is happening, but the Fed, they should be cutting rates now, not waiting until we get in a recession, because if they wait until we get in a recession, then they are playing catch up. So you see the economy slowing down now. The Fed, and this is what President Trump and Secretary Bessent are talking about, you know the economy is slowing down. That's part of the effect of the tariffs. That's what President Trump wants. Lower the Fed funds rate. Do it before it's too late and you're playing catch up. And chances are the Fed is already playing catch up. So let's look at existing home sales. We missed the forecast for March in existing home sales. We saw a 5.9% month over month drop, down to 4.02 million existing home sales. Interesting though, the annualized pace of 4.02 million, that's versus the 3.95 million that was projected. And this reflects buyers, again, March closings reflects buyers shopping in January and February when rates were higher. 36 days on the market, it's down really from 42. So homes are still selling quickly, but just not as many. Inventory though, inventory continues to rise up to 1.33 million. That's an 8.1% increase year over year. And we're up 20% year over year, people. That's a lot, not month over month, but year over year, 20%. But guess what? We are still near the lowest total of existing home sales in the last 26 years. I say that again. While we are 20% more than we were last year, we are still near the lowest point of existing home sales that we have been in the last 26 years. So not a lot of homes going off the market, which is why you see inventory going up 8.1% month over month. There is 4 months of supply of homes, which is inching closer to the average. The average is about 4.6 months. And at 4.6 months of supply, we consider that a balanced market between sellers and buyers. First-time home buyers was actually up though last month. So despite all the angst in the housing market, first-time home buyers went up from 31% to 32% in March. So some kind of conflicting news, but overall good news for buyers. Let's take a look at new home sales. All right, existing home sales kind of mixed. New home sales were pretty strong though. We saw a 7.4% month-over-month jump in March on new home sales. Up 6% year over year. That's a pretty good number. You see new homes for sale at 8.3 months of supply, but remember, a lot of these homes aren't even started yet. Only 119,000 of them are actually completed. New homes for sale up at 503,000. What you are seeing though, and you don't really see this here, is fewer homes being started, fewer contracts coming in. So really something to keep an eye on. Remember, the best benefits that buyers are getting right now are the incentivized purchases of new homes, because the builders cannot have an increased supply of homes sitting on the market. They need them sold, built, next. And right now, there's a lot more new homes on the market than there have been in the past. Let's look at BA rates. All right, I talked about this at the beginning. We started the week. Rates actually went up on Monday, went up near 6.5%. As we end the week, though, we've had two days in a row where rates have come down. We're just around 6.35%. And this is a week where there hasn't been a lot of news. And I would tell you, much of the reason why rates are coming down this week is because the lack of drama coming from DC. All right, President Trump and Secretary Bessent have calmed the nerves of investors and economists alike. All right, last week, President Trump saying, I'm going to fire Chairman Powell, the chair of the Fed. Well, this week he's saying, I'm not going to fire Fed Chair Powell, because people have talked to him. Secretary Bessent, a few others have talked to him and said, hey, that would actually hurt the market. We know the entity we have in there right now. they're starting to see that you get various Fed presidents talking about the impact of tariffs and the economy slowing down. So the impact is starting to be seen by various members of the Fed. It's just a matter of time before the Fed lowers the Fed funds rate. Now let's talk about where rates are going to go next week. We have a huge week next week as far as news goes. All right, we always end the month with the PCE report, the Personal Consumption Expenditure Report. That comes out on Wednesday, and then on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we have Jobs Week. We have the ADP, the Private Sector Jobs Report, and then Friday, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics Jobs Report. This could be a 1-2 punch to knock rates down below 6.25% next week. Expectations are that inflation is continuing to go down, which is good. That's very good. All right. And the expectation that unemployment will continue to go up because, hey, Doge has been cutting a lot of jobs and the Secretary of State, he's revamping his cabinet, and you see a lot of other federal jobs, federal government entities are cutting down the number of people within their rice bowl. So, remember, I just saw one of the guys I work with today. He's a government employee. He's like, I'm taking that voluntary retirement. I'm getting paid till September, and you know what? I'm done. All right, he doesn't want any more to do with it. He's getting a nice payout. He's golfing. He's enjoying life. You're seeing a lot of that. Those numbers don't necessarily go on the books right away, but they are going to make an impact on the overall unemployment and the jobs market. So next week is huge, folks. Pay attention. I'll be reporting this as we go through the week, but definitely something to keep an eye on for interest rates. All right, so let's talk about, buyers. Mortgage apps down 2 weeks in a row. Mortgage apps were lower than they were the previous week, down 7% week over week. Refinance apps, hey, you know what? We were just talking about refinancing everybody 3 weeks ago. Well, guess what? Second week in a row, refinance applications down, this time down 20% week over week. And I tell you, those people who are waiting for rates to come down, you know what? So is everybody else, and it's going to be super competitive if you're trying to get into the housing market when you got a lot more competition. And now sellers, they're not going to give you any credits. Their sellers are giving credits right now. I'm seeing that on listing after listing. I talk to realtors all over the island. I help push their homes on social media, and I ask them every week, hey, is your home still on the market? Yeah. Price reduced. Yeah, we're giving a bigger seller credit. So this is the time. This is the time for buyers to get in the market and get a little bit of those seller concessions. Sellers, hey, April is the best time to put your home on the market. But I will tell you what, the market is saturated, certainly on the west side, windward side of the island. There's never a lot of inventory. But I actually did just have a client get into contract and get a pretty healthy credit in Kaneohe. So not to say it doesn't happen, but you got to have the right realtor team going to bat for you, making a strong offer so that your offer gets accepted no matter where it's at on the island. All right, that's about all I have for you this week. Have a great week. Stay tuned for next week as we see kind of how crazy the market gets. I think it's going to get pretty wild. All right, so buckle up. All right, aloha.